we didn't need anyone to tell me to go to the base. All the soldiers just went directly to their base. As I mentioned, I have a duffel bag ready to go. I just switched my Shabbos clothes to an army uniform, headed to base. My main concern was who is today my wife, at that time my fiance. She's not going to be able to open her phone and see what's happening with me. And when she is going to be able to open her phone, I won't have my phone with me, because when the officers meet to plan the next missions, we have our phones away because Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran are tapping our phones. Eventually, when I was able to get a hold of her, I asked her, are we going to continue with the wedding or not? Because we were meant to have a very big party, 500-600 people. That's not going to be the case. Apparently, the question of do you postpone the wedding or do you continue with it was asked 50 years ago during the Yom Kippur War. And Harav Eliashiv Zatzal said that for such an important question, only one person can give the answer, and that is the Kala, the bride. So my wife said, we're going to continue with the wedding. I left the army base on the 4th day of the war. We had an extremely small event, maybe 40 people. I think half of them we don't know. They just came to like Misameach Chatan V'Kala in a charity hall of Yad Sarah. And the next day I went back to war. So that was that's where the war found me.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, I'm sure seeing, I think you might have said the fellow's name, he was a colonel in the army, driving a car, very religious man, sounds like in Shabbat. That must have been interesting moment of, I guess, recognition, revelation that something very serious was wrong. So after that, Ron, I presume you end up going over to Gaza, and perhaps you can talk a little bit about, what you saw when you ended up there, how long you were there. Maybe you can share a few stories about your interactions with some of the other soldiers you're with.
With pleasure. Let me start just with the first 2 weeks, because it took Israel about 2 weeks to do the ground invasion. And the reason for that is because when it's a war, we're talking about a tremendous amount of soldiers. So it takes time to arm everyone. You need to see that the rifles are working. You need to train the soldiers a little bit, put the bullets in the magazine. These things take time. Two more things that you should know is that I fought in Gaza, in Lebanon, Judean Samaria, some other places. I've seen combat. What was very unique for me in the first 2 weeks is that we were searching for terrorists within Israel proper. My battalion officer, he's a farmer who lives near Gaza. He told us, we're searching for terrorists where me and my kids ride bicycles for leisure time. It's very, very strange. It's not something that you'd imagine to do. One guy from a regiment, he had 11 clip magazines in his house. We told him he shot more bullets on October 7th to protect his kibbutz in Zikim than he would shoot when we will enter Gaza. One last thing that prevented the ground invasion from happening in the date it was planned was that when the tanks and the bulldozers approached the fence, they saw a pile of bodies, a big pile of bodies. And the main concern was that in these bodies, you might have bodies of missing people from Israel, Jews. And if you go over these bodies with a tank, you're not going to be able to understand whose DNA is whose. So the decision was to extract the bodies and to postpone the ground invasion in a couple of days, 3-4 days, because to extract a body, it's not that you can just go to the fence and pull the body back. You have to have, it's a whole army operation, because you have Hamas terrorists shooting at you, AK-47, RPGs, artillery. So that was the, let's say, the opening scene before we went into Gaza. Maybe before I'll share some battles, maybe I'll try to explain what it looks like to be in Gaza, because I had very interesting questions, and not just from Americans, also from Israelis. They asked me, how often do you shower? Like, there's no running water in Gaza. There's no electricity. You don't shower. You have your army boots, your army uniform, your bulletproof vest, your vest, a big bag. You usually can take that bag down, a rifle, and it's not just that you cannot shower, it's that you don't have a bathroom. And when you have 1,500 guys in one place, that's an issue. So I always, there's a question if I should go to these details, but I think that the answer is yes, because I think it will help people understand just how uncomfortable it is. Basically, you go in a plastic bag or a plastic bottle. How do you get food? How do you get water? These are missions. Missions, when you have a convoy entering Gaza, they're not going to reach each individual soldiers. So they drop all of the food in one place, and you go and you have to pick it up. And when you pick it up, you don't have your hands holding your rifle. So you have to have another soldier who is guarding you. Noise. People ask me, I gain weight in the war. People ask me, how can you gain weight in a war? I say, because we eat a lot of junk. For some reason, we got a gigantic donation of Mentos candies. Have nothing against them, even though I'm more of a Reese's Pieces type of guy. But you eat unhealthy stuff, and they say, but don't you fight? And the answer is yes, you do fight, but you don't fight 24/7. The regiment fights 24/7, but sometimes this company is fighting. But then when you have another company that's taking another part of a city, maybe three other companies are not allowed to shoot because we don't have the tragedy of blue and blue, friendly fire. So most of the day you're managing the battalion, and you're not actually running from one place to the other. You do that between 40 minutes a day to 4 hours a day. You don't know. There's noise. There's 24 hours of noise. Either it's the IDF shooting, Hamas shooting, the Israeli airstrikes, artillery, houses being exploded because of Hamas explosives that they've left there, tunnels being exploded by IDF. There's constant noise. When you go to bed, usually you do it with earplugs to kind of try to imagine that all of the shooting is some sort of a white noise that you can ignore. And lastly, I'll share where is it that we're staying, because you also need to sleep, even if you're not sleeping, to be in a certain area. So you have two options. Either you're in an open field, and then either a bulldozer will create like an overground foxhole, or you find something that's similar to a foxhole, or you go into a house. Now, what does it mean that you go into a house? You go into whatever is left of a house, because I'm not going to send my soldiers to a house that has explosives in it, and all the houses had explosives in it. So you bomb a house. You don't even have to use a lot of ammunition. You can just use a tank shell, and it shakes the house. And the explosives that Hamas had prepared in order to make sure that the house will collapse on the soldiers, it's detonated, and then you go to the ruins of the house, and that's how people are inside that. So that's the opening.
Ron, I just wanted to emphasize something. You just said every house has explosives in it.
Yes.
Truly. Everywhere.
Yeah, I want to make this point clear. Every house that I went into had either explosives, rockets, ammunition, Nazi propaganda, anti-Israel propaganda. Every single house. I don't have a single exception. Just so you'll understand, I was surprised by the fact that I kept getting surprised. You go into a house and you see women's shoes, and you see towels, and you see blankets, and you see notebooks with pictures of princesses on them, and you think to yourself, wow, these people are just like us. And then you put your hand on a bag of diapers, and in these diapers you find grenades. I don't know if the people who are watching me, if they saw it was published. My guys found in an UNRWA school, and we can talk about UNRWA later. In an UNRWA school, we found a sniper rifle in a teddy bear. So yeah, that's the people that we are dealing with. And just to crank it up a notch, whenever we went into a mosque or a medical center or a school, we knew that it's not just going to be a few grenades or explosive device or rocket. It's going to be a lot of that. And that's the way it was. The most cynical usage of all of these infrastructure are supposed to be civilian or made for civilian. They're actually terror base.
Wow, that's unfortunate, of course, since it's horrible. On the other hand, Ron, if I could take a quick step back, as us and Jackson Hole community got together on October 7th and afterwards, we had two, what I would, I guess, categorize as consistent thoughts. Number one was, how could this have happened? Where was intelligence? Why was this such obvious, seemingly gaps in intelligence? Number two, the response. It seems like the response, how IDF responded, Shabbat, there's a holiday, there's a lot of other factors going on there, but it also seemed to us that there were gaps in both intelligence as well as a significant delay in the response. And share what you can, if you can, at all, about both of those topics.
With pleasure. I'll start with these two different topics. I'll start with the first. I actually posted on September, a month before it happened. I wrote that I am arguing that the people of Gaza are just going to barge from the fence and murder people in the towns around Gaza. The response that I received for that was, you're a right-wing hawkish warmonger. And
Uh-huh.
I asked the people, what is it that you see that I don't? Because all the soldiers, all the female soldiers that are doing reconnaissance on the fence are saying this. All my friends who are lower ranking officers are saying this. Retired General Brick said it often. I'm like, I'm not sure I understand why you don't think it's going to happen. I didn't know it's going to happen in October. I didn't know it's going to be such a horrendous attack, but I literally wrote a month before, this is what they're going to do. I had an argument with Ron Khalifa, the head of intelligence. I spoke with him 11 months before it happened. He's a high-ranking officer. I'm a low-ranking officer, and I told him, with all due respect, I think he doesn't understand the enemy. He said there's deterrence 200-kilometer radius. I think that's very arrogant. I don't think that that's the case, and I didn't say it like this, but I told him I think that you are wrong with your analysis. And he said we have the F-35, and I said I don't think the enemy cares that we have the F-35. And then I had an argument with another high-ranking officer who's the head of the reserves, and I told him that I think that he's wrong because he's not preparing the army for war. And he said, how many enemies do you think the IDF has? He keeps shutting down regiments for army reserves. There's like a concept of a small, smart army, and I'm pro the smart part, just not the small part. It should be a strong, big, smart army, in my opinion.
Mhm.
And I said, we have Hamas. He said, the IDF is more. I said, we have Hezbollah. He said, the IDF is more. I said, what if we have both? And he told me, that's not the scenario. He said, what do you mean it's not the scenario? It's the scenario. Not a, it's the scenario.
Right.
Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, some Arabs from Israel proper, another Arab country joining. That is not ace. It's the that's why you train me 2 months every year. So if you ask me how it happened, a lot of arrogance. And also they call it a conception. I call it a misconception that basically if you give the Arabs a better life, they're not going to try to murder you. And I'm sorry, I don't think that that's the case. So that's number one. Regarding the reaction after it happened,
Mhm.
I actually think differently. I understand. I mean, I can completely understand why the people who were there feel like they were abandoned. But in the history of modern warfare, you've never had any any success like Israel had on October 7th after the atrocity, after the horrible tragedy, the worst thing that's happened since the Holocaust. After that, to be able to push back 3,000 terrorists within less than 24 hours is unprecedented. Didn't happen anywhere in the world. It happened not because of the smart generals. It happened because of the resilience of the individuals who came and fought. I have a friend from my active team. I'm a good Yatushu. I went to the army base. He didn't wait. He just went there. He took a friend, took a gun, went directly to the south. I don't know how many terrorists he killed. People who were just discharged from the army just went directly to the south, but also the army itself. I have friends that I know from Shaldag who are now in active service. They were there at 7:30 in the morning. So the army messed up big time. The cards that we were dealt with to begin were horrible cards,
Yeah.
but the way we handled these cards, I think, was phenomenal. If you think of Yossi Bacha, a retired general, I don't know if he's 64, 67, he himself took down 14 terrorists. So I think once Israel woke up from this horrible catastrophe, I think the reactions were actually very good.
Yeah, Ron, really appreciate that perspective. It's very easy for us here in the States to think, oh my God, what happened and why did it take so long to get, push these guys back to their side, right? So thank you for that. That was great clarity. And again, we just lack here. I was wondering if you could can you share at all about general attitude of the Israeli population? How would you describe it, in terms of the desire to finish the fight and kind of get the job done and win? And actually, as a follow-up question, what does winning truly look like, right? What does victory look like from your perspective, please?
Victory is the annihilation of Hamas and the return of all of the hostages. And for me, and I think for every soldier that I've met that was near me, not just from my regiment, from other army forces as well, it's not a question of if you can do it. Of course we can do it. And the soldiers want to win. It's not, can you clean your house for Passover from Chametz? You can. It takes a lot of time. You have to go over, but you can clean it. Chametz. It's a similar cleansing that we have to do. I don't think that there are soldiers who don't think that you can do it. When you're there, you know that you can do it. However, I will say that it's going to take a lot of time. I'm not an expert for this, so I am saying this a little bit hesitant, but I think that Hamas is currently the biggest fortress that anyone has ever built, because that's what it is. They have about 600 miles of tunnels. All of Gaza is not 600 miles. Basically, they have a whole underground underneath the whole area. And it's going to take a long time. And I just want to try to explain why it's going to take a long time. Think of a outlet on the floor. That's the size of the radius of a rocket. Now it's long, but you dig it into the ground. Unless you're standing on it, you're not gonna know it's there. So my friends, when we were in one city in Gaza, we knew that there were no terrorists um, uh, in that area, but Hamas was still able to fire rockets at Israel because there was someone who's half a mile underground, just detonating that rocket. So you have to go to every square inch of Gaza, and you're going to have to go to every tunnel. So it's going to be very, very long. But of course we can do it, and I think the soldiers, the way I see it, and again, I think I'm speaking on behalf of all the soldiers I've met. There may be soldiers who think differently. I've never met such a soldier. Basically, we're saying, hey, everyone who's outside of the army, government, politician, radio, media, academia, step aside. We are here for the win. We want to continue, even with the discomfort that it causes us because we're not professional soldiers, we're reservists. We're here for the win.
It's amazing. And what about the overall Israeli population? How would you categorize them and what they think? Keep on pushing forward. I mean, the reason I'm bringing this up, right, as you very well know, I mean, there's incredible calls from all over the place for ceasefires, right? And of course, yeah, all right. And of course, along with that is, the questioning. There's a narrative now that is appearing that is questioning, the Palestinians are now the victims. Israel no longer has a moral high ground, right? So, would you say that overall the Israeli population is susceptible to that kind of mentality, or are they very well aware that, for the most part, I mean, you put 5 Jews in a room, you get 5 different opinions, of course, right? We all know that, but overall, would you say the attitude of the population is, we got to finish this up, we can't stop now?
Overall, I would say the Israeli public is similar to my opinion. Not in other topics. In other topics, I'm probably considered to be with my own opinion. But regarding this, I think I represent most of
Okay.
the public. I will say also that I don't judge the families of the hostages who are going with this campaign. I'm not even sure it's not all the families. I'm not sure it's them who are running this campaign. But my neighbors are not the Swedes or it's not Switzerland or Norway. We had a ceasefire on October 6th.
Right.
Hamas already said that they want to do October 7 again and again and again. And if I'm not an expert in business, I'm not a businessman, but I think if we would have some sort of bargaining, I would not say, I'll give you everything you want right now. Just please give me that. That's not how it works. I was in Gaza when we had the first ceasefire. The reason why Hamas was willing to give hostages back to Israel was because we pounded Hamas so badly that he begged for the ceasefire. And I think that's the only way to do it. So I think that the two aims that we have to bring back the hostages and to annihilate Hamas, I don't think that these are two conflict of goals. I think that they actually complement each other.
No, terrific. I really appreciate that perspective. You touched on UNRWA a little bit, and of course their role in perpetuating the hatred of Jews and Israelis. Do you have any further comments on that, Ron? Or
Yeah, I could give a whole lecture on UNRWA because I wrote 2 policy papers about the UN, but forget about the war, before the war, and forget about Israel. UNRWA is problematic because according to the UN, you're supposed to treat all groups equally. I'll say this fast, and all the other refugees in the world, about 30 million of them, they're all being received by are being taken care of by about 6,000 people. The people who are giving the aid are not the people who are receiving the aid. For UNRWA, you have about 5 million people. I'll address how we got to 5 million in a second. You have about 25,000 staffers, which is not close to the proportion to all of the other refugees in the world. And the people who are giving the money are the people who are receiving the money. UNRWA is the work and relief agency, relief and work agency for the Arabs who claim that they come from the land of Israel. And that's the most important part. In any other refugee issue in the world, you have people living somewhere, and then you had some sort of catastrophe, earthquake, war, and then you have refugee, and then you try to resettle them, and then it's supposed to go back to zero. The definition of a refugee when it comes to UNRWA, I don't remember the exact date, but basically it's anyone who will send and adopt a kid from China, and that kid would still be a refugee under the UNRWA definition. So it's only going up, it's ballooning, it's only increasing itself, and it's basically a political tool to fight Israel. That's regardless of Israel, it's wrong. Now let's talk about the problems with Israel. The moderate parts of UNRWA teach their kids that Jews are descendants of apes and pigs, and it's good to murder us. They have the same allocation of funds coming from Hamas and to UNRWA, building the equivalent to the, it's not a very good one, but to the Navy SEALs of Hamas being funded from UNRWA funds. I didn't need this war to know that UNRWA is involved with terror. In Protective Age in 2014, I lost 3 bodies because they went into an UNRWA medical center and the house collapsed on them. It was the Hamas base. And in October 7th, we discovered that people from UNRWA also took part in the butchering of Jews in Israel proper.
Wow. I always suspected it was quite bad. Never imagined it was as bad as what you just described. Do you want to comment on ongoing conversations about a two-state solution, Ron, or are we getting into murky waters here?
I see one question, which is, why did Hamas do this? Hamas, in their charter, they say murder all the Jews. That's what they believe. We tried for the most part to, and I think we did a good job, to make sure that we have videos of everything that we're seeing. We had GoPro cameras. I don't think Israel is doing the best job in pushing this to the world, but you can find it in the IDF's website in English, press release, and then you can find all everything I'm saying and check if it's, for most of it, you'll find a video. Hamas thinks it's a good thing to murder Jews. That's what they believe. I'm assuming Heather knows a little bit about what happened October 7th. If not, I can share, but I think it's very graphic, so I would try to avoid it unless people want me to. So yeah, they did it because they want to hurt Israel. Now, Hamas at the end of the day is a proxy of Iran. There is a theory that they were hoping that Hezbollah would join them. It would cause not 1,200 deaths, but maybe 12,000 deaths in Israel. But yeah, Hamas, all they do. Israel left Gaza in 2005. Gaza never left Israel.
Right.
I actually found in one of the houses in Gaza, there was a newspaper from 2004 talking about the disengagement. And I remember, because I remember this engagement, where people said Gaza is going to be the Singapore of the Middle East.
Right.
What we had instead was basically Hamastan. Hamas took over in 2006, went medieval on the Fatah people, burning them alive. This is for their own people, burning them alive, throwing them from rooftops. No protests in the world, by the way. They gained power, and ever since then, instead of using their resources to build a normal state, all they do is build tunnels for themselves or into Israel, rockets. Yeah, so that's Hamas's ideology.
No, I appreciate that, Ron. It's very difficult to have a two-state solution when you got essentially terrorist base camp right next door, right? One last question, and then I went over my time limit, I think, with Rabbi Mendelson. But one last question. You touched on Hezbollah. I'm very surprised that they have been held back for whatever reason from this fight so far, right? Well, it seems to be escalating. It's a slow percolation, right? It's not a massive bombardment, and they have a huge arsenal of rockets, apparently. What's your perspective on that? Why have they not jumped in yet?
I'll give you my opinion, but I just want to emphasize this is an opinion. What I said so far, I'm willing to stand behind it with both feet because it's my experience, and you can argue about my experience also. You can say maybe I didn't understand reality well, but this is just an opinion. And I'm not proud to say why I think Hezbollah did not join. I think Hezbollah did not join because of the American air carrier. Because of the American air carrier, which by itself, just that air carrier can take down all of Lebanon. Which is upsetting for me to say because it means that Israel right now is still in galus in the sense that we cannot stand by ourselves. That's option number one. Another option that I've heard is that Iran wants Hezbollah to stay as a backup. It doesn't want to use all of them. So for Iran, and again, Hamas and Hezbollah are Iranian proxies. There's no doubt about it. Just to explain how sure I am with what I say, the RPG, which is a weapon from the former Soviet Union, which was used against Americans in Vietnam, you have it in Gaza, but the warheads, the explosives are Iranians from 2020, 2021. So yeah, I'm positive that Iran is very much involved. Also, when we hear that Iran is tapping our phones and giving it to Hezbollah or Hamas, okay. So I think that these are the two main reasons why Hezbollah did not jump in. One is because Iran is saying not right now. Second, because they were scared of the Americans. And for the Iranians, who are not Arabs, nor are they Sunnis, Hamas are the easiest to sacrifice. They're Arabs and they're Sunnis, so they couldn't care less about them.
Ron, it was an amazing honor and pleasure for me to talk to you and ask you these questions. I'm going to pivot back to Rabbi Mendelson. And Rabbi, I've seen quite a number of very, very good questions that come up in the chat window. I don't know if you have access to them, but maybe you want to select.
What I would like to do, if possible, Rabbi Raskin, is there a possibility for us to unmute some of the people who ask these questions so they can speak to Ron directly? Are they able to unmute themselves? I just don't want everyone unmuting at the same time and having a loud conversation. But is there a possibility to unmute everyone? And if everyone can then just mute themselves, and then we'll call upon people who post their questions to ask their questions publicly. I think it would create a nice discussion and back and forth. Just ask a question instead of making statements. Make sure your question finishes off with a question mark. Karin, please go ahead. If you're still with us, Karin, unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so well, first of all, Mazal Tov on your wedding.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I read an article in the Jerusalem Post today, which said that basically since all the Mileuimnikim have been sent home, all the reservists have been sent home, the war in Gaza right now is over pretty much in the sense that, yes, there's still some incidents and they're still fighting and they're still killing a few terrorists here and there, but that the war is pretty much on hold. It's pretty much over. And unless Israel decides to go into Rafah, the war is over. Do you think that they will? And do you think that analysis is correct?
I think there is truth in that analysis. I don't think the war is over. People are right now fighting. I also don't think that outside of Gaza, people know how many dead terrorists we have every day. I remember when I left Gaza, I opened the radio and it felt like the Israeli media is in a campaign against me. It's like, well, why are you guys saying that, you always hear about the soldier and every soldier that's killed is a disaster, but why are you not sharing about the 150 dead terrorists every day? Why are you not sharing about the dozens of miles of tunnels that we explode every day, or the amount of ammunition that we take out of Gaza, or the information we're able to extract from Gaza? So that's number one. Number two, the first 2.5 months of fighting in Gaza were the most intense for many reasons. I'll just give one example. You cannot use artillery when you have soldiers inside. Right, just like you were asking the Gazans to move, you can also not shoot when the soldiers are there. So that's less firepower. But also, there's a difference between fighting to control an area, and then there's another task, which is to go into every square inch of Gaza, and that is actually less intense. And I think that I'm not happy with the fact that we were in this situation. I wanted this war. I just wanted it 10 years ago. Not because I'm a warmonger, but because I understood that Hamas are going to attack me when I'm not prepared. And if we would have done this 10 years ago, it would have been 20 miles of tunnels, not 600 miles of tunnels, and less combatants and so forth, and less casualties on both sides. So the starting point was horrible. But with this starting point of hundreds of miles of tunnels and 40,000 Hamas combatants and 10,000 jihadist combatants and 50,000 uninvolved terrorists in Gaza, it's going to be long. For the most part, it was intense fighting for the beginning with special forces units. The rest can be in regular combat infantry. And for your last part, should we go to Rafah? As far as I'm concerned, the answer is an obvious yes. with all due respect to the international pressure and the fear, which I think is an unjust fear of humanitarian catastrophes, a father deserves his daughter back. When a father has a 19-year-old daughter kept in Rafah, when you have a 1-year-old baby kept in Rafah, I think that we have to go there. So I'm giving my guess. I used to have a lot of exclamation points. Now I have more question marks. But if I have to guess, I would say that this war will continue to be a year, maybe 14 months. But intensity of this is going to be very different. The intensity is going to be for 2, maybe 3 more months. And after that, it's going to be closer to what Israel does in Judea and Samaria when they're trying to go into army operations.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much for that great question and great answer. Josh Beck, you had a question. Can you unmute yourself and ask it? We'd also love to see your beautiful face.
Thanks, Rabbi. Great to see you. Ron, thanks so much for agreeing to meet with us. This has been terrific. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, with Israeli security at the forefront of all of our thoughts, other than establishing a 1 or 2 kilometer buffer zone, what other options are there going forward?
I can give you different scenarios, but the buffer I would not accept any way whatsoever in the world. Just will be on the same page. In 2014, at the end of Protective Edge, that was the agreement. We lost 75 people. It was a very long army operation, almost 2 months. And at the end, we said we're going to have a buffer, 300-yard buffer. What happened? The Arabs sent their daughters, elderly people in wheelchair to the buffer zone. And then the Israeli soldiers said, we cannot shoot them. What are you going to do? And they had they had peaceful protests in the border with the fence with Israel. Today, we know that these were not really peaceful protests. They were actually digging places where they can put explosives. They're even able to kill soldiers who were on the border because Israel did not shoot them until they were literally, physically on the border and then taking out the handgun and killing soldiers. So I don't believe in these buffers. The tunnels are so long that even if you have a 5-kilometer, 5-mile buffer, it's not going to be relevant. The tunnels are way longer than this. When you're imagining a tunnel, I don't know if you're imagining a tunnel that you're crawling in. You have a tunnel that can be a 4-lane for cars in that. You have Hamas terrorists who are going with a Jeep from obviously the other end tunnel. It's gigantic. So I don't think that the buffer is relevant. I can think of many other solutions. The most important one is to kill the terrorist. You have to kill the terrorist, otherwise it's not going to end ever. It doesn't matter if they're going to have the tunnels, they're going to have the rockets, they're going to have other ways to attack Israel. By the way, a buffer of 2 kilometers takes 3 minutes to cross when you have a Toyota Jeep. So I don't think that's going to be something that's going to be very helpful.
Speaking of killing the terrorists, where does Israeli intelligence feel that Sinwar is? Do you think he escaped into Egypt? Nobody knows.
I wouldn't say stuff I don't know. By the way, I'm very happy there are many things I don't know. I said this is good that the IDF is finally able to keep secrets and to not share. And I would say an officer who's pretty much involved. So there's stuff that I do know. There's stuff that I don't know, and I'm happy I don't know. So I don't have an answer.
Okay, Mark Gamelski. Mark, unmute yourself and please ask your question.
Very well. Thanks so much, Ron, for being here in person. I think it's very important for American Jewry to hear first-person accounts from what's going on in this war. I'd like to ask you a question about long-term future. To build such a future, one needs to have a vision of what it might look like. What is your best-case scenario for the situation in Israel in regard to Palestinians, other Arab countries, say 10 years ago? Could you draw a picture that we all can envy and be happy with, and maybe provide some ideas of how to get there?
I can give you my opinion. I'm not sure it'll make you happy. So I just want to emphasize before, let's separate what I'm sharing as an experience, and basically you just ask for my political view, which I appreciate because usually Americans are trying to not talk about political views. As an Israeli, we always talk about politics. I think that Israel needs to control all of Eretz Israel. I think it's not very PC to say, but that's the best way, I think, for the Jews and for the Arabs. By the way, that's how I refer to them, as Arabs. I don't believe that they have a real nationality. I have a video, says 10 reasons why I'm not interested in peace with the Arabs of Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, and Israel proper. I believe in security, prosperity, human rights, safety of the people, Jews and Arabs. But for a piece of paper that says peace on the top, I don't care for this. I remember how my life was. I'm old enough to remember how my life was before peace broke, or as I like to call it, the Oslo War. I was able to go to an Arab village in Judea and Samaria and eat hummus. I'm not able to do this today because now we're talking about peace. The border where we have the least amount of conflict is the Syrian border. We don't have a peace treaty with Syria. And I'll wrap it up with this. An Arab would always rather live in Judea and Samaria than in Gaza. And he would always rather live in Haifa than in Judea and Samaria. A Jew will always have a safer life in Haifa than in Judea and Samaria. He'll always have a safer life in Judea and Samaria than in Gaza. The more Israel sovereignty you have, the better life the Jews have, the better life the Arabs have. And I think that is the only solution that I can think of, because when we left Gaza, we gave it to the quote-unquote moderates, PA, and then Hamas went medieval on them. PA is controlling Judea and Samaria. More than 70% of the Arabs in Judea and Samaria support October 7th and want it to happen again. They had elections in 2006. They have not had an election ever since because they know that if they will, Hamas will have a tremendous victory. And the only reason why they're not murdering Mahmoud Abbas Abu Mazen right now is because the IDF is protecting him. So I am not a fan of the two-state delusion, as I call it. I don't think it's going to work. I think that is a Western concept trying to push in the Middle East. That's not relevant. It's my opinion. I don't think it's a majority opinion in Israel. I will say after October 7th, I think a lot of people who were very different than me politically in this side are like, you know what, even if we are going to talk about peace, it's not in the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much for your opinion on that. Ron, before I go along to some other questions over here, I would love if you could share some of the moments that were spectacular or special or meaningful or memorable in some way, the light in the darkness of Gaza that you experienced. If you could just share, do you have any moments where you felt God, or you felt the power of Am Yisrael Chai, or you felt the beauty of the Jewish people, or you felt something special in that dark place of death and destruction?
Yes, I would like to share 4 quick stories, but they're very quick. One story is about a son of a coworker of mine who was injured 150 yards next to me. He was shot in the neck by a sniper when he was getting water for the rest of his company. The bullet came from one side, left from the other side. He's alive. He's walking. He's talking. He's still in pain, but he's living. He's gonna be 100% fine. To be shot in the neck by a sniper and to stay alive, it's a split of an inch to each direction. He would not be with us today. I think that's it's some stuff you cannot explain. I had something similar. Wasn't shot at actually. A rock fell on me. A rock about this size fell on me, fell on my hand from the 8th floor. So it hurt my hand a little bit, but it wasn't a big deal. If it would have fallen, I don't know, a few inches to the left, I would not be here speaking with you. I had another incident like that when I was walking with another officer. Male stereotype, he could not walk and talk. He would either walk or talk. And whenever he used the radio, he had to stop for a second. And then when he finished, he kept on walking. 30 yards from us, maybe 30 seconds after we stopped there, a whole wall from the 2nd floor just fell. I was like, wow, if you would have spoken there and not here right now, I told the other officer, we would not be here. And lastly, I want to share something that's not about a life or threat situation, but I was mesmerized from hearing what I heard. Because of the smell of dead bodies and the shooting and the lack of nutrition and the noise, we said we're going to take one soldier from each team and we're going to send him back to Israel for 12, 16, 18 hours, shower, eat something, rest, and come back. You'll be more refreshed. We have one team who's a very special team. They're special because everyone there is over the age of 40, which means they're not obligated to serve. There's actually one guy there who's 50 years old. I asked him, how long are you going to serve in the reserves? And he said, as long as there's someone who's running slower than I am. And I heard him arguing about who's going to go for a vacation, but they weren't arguing because everyone said that they want to go. They were arguing because everyone said the other guy has to go. And I hear them saying, you're a physics professor, the school year is starting, you have to teach your students. They said, me, I have tenure. This guy is just starting a new job. He's going to get in trouble if he doesn't, go home a little bit. He said, me, I am nothing. This guy just had a baby, he has to be home for his newborn. He says, me, my wife's got it, don't worry about it. This guy has 3 kids, he has to go home. And they were arguing because no one wanted to go home. Everyone said, no, this guy needs it more than I do. This is the motivation. This is the real strength that I feel when I was in Gaza, and I think that is the best representation. By the way, the biggest miracle I can think of in Gaza, Israel was in a very heated turmoil before this war. When you go into Gaza, there's no right wing, left wing, religious, secular, vegan mediator. That doesn't matter. Everyone's together. They understand what is happening, and everyone is helping the other person next to them, and that is a tremendous feeling.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, the hand of God that every soldier sees all the time. And thank you for sharing the spark of the Jewish people, that really, the unity, the achdut, the caring, that was so special. That's really what gives us strength, is when we're there for each other, support each other, and always see why somebody else might need something more than we do. Thank you for sharing that.
Reminds me of one of the hostages that when she was notified that she's going to be able to leave, she said, there's a woman that's next to me that's older than me. Let her out instead of me. And that's a powerful story of Am Yisrael Chai. Okay, James Lawler, you had a question.
Yes, my wife and I, we may be the only non-Jewish people on this program, but we come all the time to Jackson Hole, and we have heard you speak before, Rabbi. But I would like Ron to tell, what can Americans do to help Israel? What can we, the American people, do to help Israel and to hopefully bring some peace?
So I'll give you my most honest, maybe strange answer. I say this mainly to the Jewish community. As I say, stop giving money, which is very un-Israeli. Usually Israelis saying, oh, we don't need money. We're a strong country. Plus, this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. So I might tell the Jewish communities in 6 months that we do need money. Here's how I see it. I believe in self-sovereignties, meaning I think Americans need to do what's best for America, and Israel needs to do what's best for Israel. I also happen to think that there is a lot of common interests, common values, common goals, believing in democracy and freedom. So the way I see it, I think it's an American interest that Israel is fighting Hamas. I could be wrong, but that's how I see it. For those who do not know, Hamas calls Israel Little Satan and America is Big Satan. And they're both proxies of Iran. A nuclear Iran is not an Israeli problem, it's an US problem or a world problem. So that's the way I see it, and that's why I do think that it is in America's best interest for Israel to win its enemies in the Middle East, because I'm just the fence before they go into America. What can Americans do? I think that right now there's a lot of pressure being put on Israelis. I would say an unfair pressure. And I think that so far I've seen that the elected representatives in America, most of them are doing a fair job, but not everyone. In some places are not doing the best job in the world, not to keep America safe for Jews and not to allow the Israelis to find the hostages and finish the job. And again, with all due respect to international pressure, when a father has a 19-year-old daughter in Gaza, Israel needs to go to Rafah, whether the world likes it or not. So what can Americans do? They can help to ensure the fact that the elected representatives are supporting Israel if they think that it is the best thing for America. And I think it's the best thing for America.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that question and that answer. Sue Abrams. We'd love to see you as well, Sue.
Hey, Rabbi, it's Brent.
Hi, Brent.
Hey, so
I can't see you.
we have it shut off, sorry. But he just touched on it briefly, but we do have a lot of politicians that are requesting a ceasefire. They're not in support of the war. And if America were to request a ceasefire to Israel, is Israel strong enough to tell America to take a hike?
I don't think you should answer in take a hike. and I think it's very unfriendly of America to tell its best ally take a ceasefire. But I don't know if Netanyahu is strong enough to say no. I can tell you that if Netanyahu will have a ceasefire, I think that the right-wingers in Israel will say Netanyahu is no longer relevant. The soldiers, not just the right-wing soldiers, the left, that doesn't matter. The soldiers want to continue, again, not because we enjoy war, because we know that that is the right thing to do. It's like sometimes when you have to do something that's painful, you know, if to the example from war, if someone has a bullet in his shoulder, it's very painful to take the bullet out, but you have to do it. And if you won't do it, you're just going to suffer a lot more. So that is, I hope that Israel will do the right thing. I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I know what will happen. And I hope that America will do the right thing and not push Israel where it's not supposed to push Israel. But I guess we will find out in the near future.
Thank you.
It is 7:59, and I try to do these things in a way where we spend an hour together. Ron, I'm going to ask you these next 3 questions or 4 questions all together. Choose which ones you would like to focus on, whichever you would like. And then if you're willing to stick around for a little more, and we'll open it up for people to unmute themselves and just chat with you. If you're up for it, we would greatly appreciate that. It's been a fascinating conversation, and every moment has been truly cherished by myself, I know, and I'm sure the rest of us that are on over here. So I'm going to ask you all these questions together. We have from Heather Finkel. She asks, why do U.S. news stations such as NPR share only Palestinian sympathetic stories? Why do they not talk about the events that initiated this war? Kelly Ehrlich asks, what is your threat assessment regarding Iran taking direct action against Israel with both conventional and unconventional weapons? I guess that was a question from Donald. I should have known as I was reading that it was Donald. The next question was from Rabbi Moshe Halfin. You mentioned the intelligence as much as a year before the attack. Despite this, the unity behind the war, many consultants, and certainly many families of hostages, are saying that the Netanyahu coalition is responsible. Do you think he and they will go down because of the vulnerability of the attack? And Joshua Beck asks, did you experience any weapons or ammunition shortages while in Gaza? Is the U.S. keeping you well supplied? And feel free to touch on all or any of those. They're all great questions.
They're great questions. They're easy for me to answer in short answers, so I'll try to do it. For Heather, I'm sorry, I don't know why the American media is giving such a horrible cover of what's happening. I read the articles in the New York Times 2 days ago. It's like, since the war broke, 30,000 Arabs in Gaza were killed. It's like, since the war broke, like it wasn't a genocidal attack by Hamas to Israel. The war broke just like that. 30,000 dead in Gaza, not to mention how many of them are terrorists. How many of them are uninvolved civilians who took part in the attack on October 7th? I don't know why this is happening in America. And that is, again, why, for me, in my perspective, it's not just a Jewish issue or an Israeli issue. It's the collapse of the Western civilization. So I don't know. It's very sad to me. Regarding a direct attack against Israel, I think Iran is hesitant to do it, but I don't know. Unconventional weapon, a nuclear bomb on Israel, and Israel cannot rebuild itself, I think. So, but again, I don't think that the main issue with the nuclear Iran is Israel. If Iran has nuclear capacity, they already have missiles that can reach Israel. They don't need to develop more than that. They can just take a suitcase and bring it to America, and I have no doubt that if they have nuclear capacities, that will have the ability to bring suitcases with nuclear abilities to America, and I think that's very problematic. Regarding who is responsible, I'm giving my opinion here again, my political opinion. Of course, the government is responsible, and of course, Netanyahu has a part of it. I don't think he should resign in the middle of a war, but you don't have to be guilty to be responsible. If you're the prime minister and under your shift, the biggest catastrophe has happened, then I would expect him to resign in a year and a half, 2 years, when things are a little bit slowing down. I think that the left who are currently protesting and telling them he needs to resign now or to have an election now, I think that's actually what's going to give him more political power. Because I think most of the people, the right wing in Israel, said, you messed up. All the excuses, the generals didn't listen to it. It doesn't matter. You're the head, you're in charge. I think it's a horrible slogan, but there is some truth to it. Saying that, I think that to ask Netanyahu to resign in the midst of this is a joke. It's like it's caring more for taking out Netanyahu than winning. And someone asked, because there's a slogan, say we have to bring the hostages at any price. So someone asked one of the protesters, what if the price is that Netanyahu will be prime minister for 5 more years? And he said no. And I was shocked. Like I would definitely choose any politician to be the prime minister if it brings back the hostages. Did I experience weapon shortage? No, but we were trying to be more careful. I do know that the shells that the tanks were shooting, they were very calculated with how they were shooting. So regarding the supplies from the US, the supplies from the US is important. It's more important for the US to not tell Israelis not to do something. That's the way I see it. I think I was able to answer all 4.
Fantastic. This was fascinating, Ron. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, Ron will be sharing some of the same stuff, some new stuff at the State Capitol building in Cheyenne, and we welcome each and every one of you to come. We have a long lineup of political and religious figures and community leaders and activists from all around the state that are going to be speaking and showing their support for Israel. Really a great group of people, and I invite all of you to join us for the special marking of 5 months of the horrific October 7th attacks, and to let our political leaders and the media know where we stand and where Wyoming stands. And so please join us for that if you're able to, 12 o'clock State Capitol building. And with this, we're going to formally conclude this event, and anyone who wants to stay on, I especially would love for Ron to stay on. You're welcome to unmute yourself and just continue the conversation. Please put your hands together and give a warm Jackson Hole thank you, a Wyoming thank you, to Ron Bar Yoshafat, a Laramie thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Raskin, for inviting your community to attend and for doing this together with us. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much.
And with that, feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions or comments or something that Ron said that you want more clarification on. Let's give everyone equal time and equal opportunity to voice their questions or concerns.
Rabbi, you want us to just jump in?
Yes, please, Avi.
Yeah, Alan, toda rabba.
Simcha.
Two questions, if I can. One, to the best of your ability, if you can put on look into your crystal ball and best case and worst case scenario for outcomes in terms of what might unfold. And I'll hold my second question for a moment.
Best case scenario, Israel attacks Lebanon at the best time for Israel with a ground invasion, and we finish it with 3 weeks to a month and a half. Worst case scenario, we don't, and then we're going to be suffering from another October 7th done by the Hezbollah Radwan, which is way more capable of the Hamas's Nukhba, and we have a lot more casualties and have to start all of this over again. Saying still something that we need to know, in the best case scenario, Israel might suffer a week or 2 with no electricity. I'm very optimistic, I think it will prevail, but when you have about 200,000 rockets, and these are not rockets like Hamas's, these are very intense rockets, aiming at Israel, it's going to be a tough month.
Thank you. My follow-on question, we talk about the conflict, obviously. We're dealing with terrorists, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad. Then, of course, we have the proxy war with Iran that we're all aware of. There seems to be a third layer, which is the energy and, in the region and the importance of the region for trade and for supplying energy from one region to Europe. And it seems to be a conversation that often we don't have and we don't look at. And, Russia with Iran and the United States have a lot of interest in the region. Do you have a perspective on that that you would share with us?
I can give you a perspective. It's not really my field of expertise, but there's a reason why Russia is so connected to Syria. That's basically their entrance to the Middle East. That's their way to export gas and oil and so on and so forth. If Israel will have a peace treaty with Saudi Arabia, which I really hope it will, then that changes a whole lot of. It's a different economic world for Russia, because basically it means that stuff from the east can come to the west through Israel. And then Russia and Syria and Iran are becoming less relevant, which is one of the reasons I think that October 7th happened when it happened. It was a way to prevent Israel and the UAE to become closer. It's also a question of, will America back the UAE as it's doing right now to the Ukraine, or what's going to happen? So I think that might force Saudi Arabia to reevaluate who they're going to join. But it's a geostrategic affairs. I'm not an expert in that. It's just from my perspective.
Thank you.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question to Ron. It's open mic night.
Could be that we're done.
We have a very shy crowd tonight. What happened to everyone? Heather, go ahead, please.
I had no idea. I'm a little bit ignorant, or maybe very ignorant. I don't watch the news or anything. I pretty much stay away from it. But I had no idea that Lebanon was even involved. So I was surprised to hear that that may be in the plans or in the ideal plans.
There are 100,000 Jewish refugees in Israel at the moment, all from the north, because Hezbollah is firing direct rockets at homes in the north of Israel. In fact, the people of the northern part of Israel are suffering more right now than the people in the south who are returning to go back to their homes. And if I was someone who would live in the north, I would not take my family to be where you have Hezbollah on the border. And unlike ballistic rockets that are flying and hit, and usually weaker rockets that Hamas have, Hezbollah has the ability to shoot a rocket into someone's window to find him exactly by his desk. So Hezbollah has right now, according to what they publish, more than 400 dead Hezbollah terrorists. Every day they're attacking dozens of times into Israel, firing rockets at Israeli civilian places and army targets. That's the situation in the north, but they're keeping it. It's not an all-out war. Israel is not talking about a ground invasion. And I think one of the reasons why Israel is not is because they wanted to isolate. In fact, more soldiers were sent to the north than they were in Gaza, because they wanted to isolate the north, because, like I mentioned, they weren't preparing to a two-front war. So they isolated the north. They want to finish the main combat part in Gaza, which I estimate 2-3 more months. And then, like someone commented regarding the Jerusalem Post, it's going to be less intense war. But then you'll have all of the soldiers who are refreshed and had their time back home and were able to fix whatever they needed to fix. And all of the Israeli Air Force and artillery and tanks being all focused on the north.
I have another question.
Yes, please.
You had mentioned that Hamas and Hezbollah say Israel is the small Satan and the US is the big Satan.
I have.
Does Israel have any intelligence that any of the terrorists are coming through our southern border right now with our unchecked immigration?
No, I don't have that information. If I had to bet, I would say yes. Not because of I know it's a very heated topic in America. I'm aware of it.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a controversial topic, and it's not directly related to Israel. It's a good question, but I think it's the kind of question to speak to Ron about privately. So we're creating an opportunity to have discussions around Israel exclusively, not our southern border. I'm sorry, Brent, to do that to you. I know it's a subject that you care deeply about, but
no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's I'm not touching American politics. I already burned myself with half the people here for being, I think, with my answer to I think to Mark. But I'm not talking about what's right or wrong. I'm just saying from a military perspective, if I had to bet, I would say that's also another way for people to come into to America. It's not relevant. The other example would be how Hezbollah is selling drugs in America, because that's how they make their money, or they do the same in Europe. So. Yeah, but 100%, we're small Satan, America is big Satan. They say it openly. It's not like I'm giving you some secret intel that the Mossad has. Like every big rally, that's what they shout.
I have Let me ask it in Hebrew because it's a very complicated question, and if
Okay.
Ram can translate the question and give me the answer.
Okay.
רן, קודם כל תודה רבה שהגעת. יש לי שאלה, שפה אנשים הם לא הצליחו להבין. אנחנו ישראלים, אנחנו יודעים באמת מה שקורה, ממקור ראשון. זה לא שאנחנו קוראים או שאנחנו יודעים על אוקראינה או משהו כזה. יש לנו, איך אנחנו יכולים להסתדר? קשה לישון בלילה למשל, שאתה שומע דברים של שקרים, של דברים כמו עופר כסיף, של דברים של מאוד מעצבנים ועושים aggravation. איך מסתדרים עם זה? אתה יודע, אני לא יכול לישון בלילה, אני מרגיש מדוכא, אני מרגיש שקשה לי ביום, אני מרגיש שזה שייך לי, אני פה, הם שם, איך מסתדרים עם זה?
So the question was, how do you manage with the fact that Israelis, I'm going to use it with my words, I hope it's okay. No one can tell an Israeli that October 7th did not happen, because every single Israeli knows either someone who's now a hostage or someone who was murdered on October 7th. We're a small country. Everyone, like for Israelis, this is not like a war that's far away. We know the people. I lost friends. Like I know it's real. And then you have people who are writing horrible stuff about Israel also in Israel. So how do I manage that? And at the end of the day, it is very frustrating. It's not a new concept. Self-hating Jew is not a new concept, and self-hating Israeli is not a new concept. But just so you know, MK Ofer Kasif, as you gave as an example, I'm not sure that's the most troubling part. The head of Breaking the Silence wrote a wonderful piece on Foreign Affairs, which is a very esteemed magazine. So yes, we have people from within who are bashing Israel. How come and why? I don't know. My psychology is not my field. But that's the price that we pay, and I think it's a fair price to pay when you live in a democracy. I need to also allow people to say whatever they want to say, even when I think they're completely wrong. I would say not just wrong, I would say they're lying completely. But that's part of it. You know, I also you have the same in other places in the world. It's very frustrating, but I will say this, and this might make you a little bit more optimistic. I hear people in America who are saying we want to do more, because they're in America, they're not in Israel right now. And then you see Israelis who are not soldiers and they're saying, I want to do more. And then you see Israeli soldiers who are in combat, but they're just guarding right now and say, I want to do more. And then you have people who are saying, I'm in Judea and Samaria. I'm only capturing 2,500 terrorists in Judea and Samaria, but I'm not in Gaza. I want to do more. And then you have soldiers in the front in the border with Lebanon, killing 400 Hezbollah terrorists. They're saying, I want to do more. And then you have people in Gaza are saying, you know, I'm in Gaza and I'm fighting, but I didn't kill enough terrorists. I want to do more. And then in my battalion, a company officer, his company just took down 2 terrorists. And whenever you have casualties, you bring an officer to investigate to see everything was done accordingly. The regiment officer asks the company officer, what do you think? He says, I want to do more. So in that sense, when you have all of the really this horrible scum of the earth people who are lying and bashing Israel, just remember that the vast majority of the Jewish people are normal and they want to do more and they want to help the Jewish people. And that's the chizuk that I'm getting, because the people around me are amazing people. Right-wing, left-wing, religious, secular, they're amazing people. That's where I get my chizuk. And that's how I'm able to say, you know, Ofer Kasif, okay, it's one example. It's not most of the Jewish people.
Thank you for that. I also want to do more. That was beautiful. Christine, do you have any questions?
You don't know how to unmute? We'll unmute you.
I'm going to ask to unmute you. You have to respond yes.
I think, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So many questions, but first I just want to say thank you. Thank you. The Israeli soldiers had rescued some hostages, and there was just very little story of that. What are your thoughts on more of the hostages being rescued at this time? Trying to hold out hope, but it's unimaginable. So I don't know if that's more of a question or just feedback. Just my heart is just broken over that.
To find hostages, even if it is dead hostages, is something that the soldiers are extremely eager to do, even at the expense of risking our lives. My guys were able to find, unfortunately, dead hostages, but we were able to find bodies of two hostages. One girl who was the Peace Festival, the Nova Festival, and one soldier in a tunnel. And I asked the soldiers, like, do you know, because we're searching for this, we're not going to go home for another 2 weeks, not showering, whatever, risking our lives. And they all said, even if it's a bad ending, the parents deserve a grave. They deserve to know how it ends. And that's for people who we assume they're not going to be alive when we find them. For live hostages, you would change the mission right now, and you go and you try to do it, but it's very complicated because you don't want to have them killed during the process of you trying to save them. And I'm already out of Gaza, so now I have less intelligence about what's happening with the hostages. But I can tell you from my experience that the hostages are the most important thing for the soldiers. It doesn't contradict the annihilation of Hamas. When you're in Gaza right now, and if you have even a fraction of hope that in this area or that area you're going to find hostages, you're going to go there and you're going to try to do whatever you can to take them out.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else with questions before we call it a night?
I'd like to ask something. On the you're talking before about the UNRWA, the United Nations refugee group, and there was initially there were some reports of like there were only 13 people, and then there was 4 people, and then there was like different numbers of people who were confirmed. But from what you were saying and from everything that we know from before, there's many, many more who are involved. Do you know do you have any more on why there were certain numbers given out, or like how many people are involved? What's the scope of that involvement?
I don't know how many people who are involved in UNRWA actually murdered Jews. I can say that regardless of Israel or Jews, UNRWA is an organization that was created in a sin. It violates the UN Charter. It's forget about the fact that it's not run in a fair way. The people who are the recipient of the money are the people who are giving the money. They have more manpower than all of the other refugees in the world together. The definition of a refugee is not okay. That is a problem, regardless of me being a Jew or an Israeli. If I'll add to that the fact that in their school they're teaching this is not terrorism, but they are teaching the Jews are descendants of apes and pigs, and it is a good thing to murder us, then that's another problem. The fact that some of the people who are in UNRWA are also people who are Hamas terrorists, that's another problem. UNRWA funds being given to uniform or to build the Hamas version of their Navy SEALs, another problem. UNRWA bags, they're supposed to be filled with flour to bake bread from, but they're actually filled with guns, is another problem. UNRWA medical centers, who are supposed to be medical centers, but they're actually Hamas based. They're supposed to lure soldiers inside so they would collapse on them. It's another problem. And at the end of all of that, you also have people that we saw and we know that are working for UNRWA, and with their own hands, they mutilated, raped and murdered Jews in Israel on October 7th. So I don't know how many of them are people who are raping and murdering per se, but I know that even those who are not are involved of everything else that I just shared. There's problematic with UNRWA.
Thank you very much.
Larissa, do you have a question? We're not hearing you. I asked to unmute you. There you go.
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you very much for such a wonderful explanation and answers. And I'm hoping to join you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gretchen, I see that you're on. Are you hearing me? Do you have any questions? Elena, Cheryl?
I don't have any questions. Just thank you so much.
Steve Warren, Wendy Barrelson, Matani, Helen, Jamie Wells, Corey Richmond. Josh has another question.
Looks like he's ready to ask another question.
If Josh is ready to ask a question, he'll ask a question. Okay. Thank you, Ron, so much for doing this. You are a hero of the Jewish people. We're so grateful that you spent the time with us this evening. We'll look forward to spending time with you again tomorrow in person. I fly out very early morning to Denver, and I'll see you, be picking you up in the car rental and driving you up from Denver to Cheyenne for this very special event, and looking forward to getting to spend more time with you. Thank you all so much for joining us. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you, Ron.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tova.
Laila Tov.